Arkansas, Tom Cotton, member of the Senate Armed Forces Committee. He's a U.S. veteran. Senator, good morning to you.
Morning, Steve.
On this Thursday morning, as we look in the rearview mirror about what happened yesterday, what do you want to say to the American people about the debacle on Capitol Hill?
Steve, I want to say that mob violence is never an acceptable form of political expression. Last summer, a lot of critics on the left said that I should not have said that we should use all available means to law enforcement to put down mob violence when insurrectionists gripped our streets, even if that meant sending in the troops. Yesterday, though, there's no difference. It shouldn't matter what kind of signs the mob carries before they become violent. There's no acceptable basis for mob violence in this country for political purposes. I want to express my gratitude to all those frontline Capitol police officers who protected senators, helped frail senators evacuate from the chamber, who tried to defend the perimeter of the Capitol and then cleared the Capitol of all of these insurrectionists. I'm grateful for them and the work that all the other law enforcement agencies that were called in to do to protect not just senators and representatives, but the staff and the support workers that we have around the Capitol.
Yep.
The Senate was delivered to the Democrats yesterday. Ossoff ended up beating Perdue, and that was announced yesterday afternoon or last night. And many Republicans are worried about what that means for the progressive movement. What do Republicans plan to do to ensure that some of these radical agendas are not passed?
Yeah, Ainsley, obviously I'm disappointed that my good friends and great senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue didn't make it across the finish line, but congratulations to the Democrats for their victory. This is going to be a very, very closely divided Congress. It's literally evenly divided in the Senate, 50-50 now. And in the House, the Democrats have one of the smallest margins in modern times. So what the Republicans need to do now that this election is behind us is to focus on the radical agenda of the Democrats, because they're coming in with a plan to raise your taxes and to defund the police, to slash military spending, to open our borders, and we cannot allow that to happen. And we've got to organize and we've got to concentrate on protecting everything that we believe and that we think is good for this country.
Senator, this wasn't a surprise that the Democrats thought they had an opportunity to take both seats, even though they were underdogs. You had Perdue with a commanding lead, 88,000 votes at least, and the other, Loeffler, the same thing, was in a command position. You were on the ground, I think, first week in November, saying, hey, this is a big election. How did you guys blow it?
Yeah, Brian, it's very disappointing that we lost the races, given the stakes of the races. I think a very simple and very clear message over the last 2 months would have been that Senators Perdue and Loeffler and a Republican Senate majority will provide a check and balance on the Biden administration. However, we spent too much time on other matters rather than that clear and simple matter of saying that Senators Perdue and Senators Loeffler and a Republican majority could be that check and balance. But look, we can't just give up now because we lost. We got to pick ourselves up off the electoral playing field and dust ourselves off and get back going in the game. Because as I said, the Democrats have extremely small margins, but they have an extremely radical agenda, and we've got to be prepared to provide a check and balance on that agenda and get ready for the next election, which is always just 2 years away.
Sure. No doubt about it. Down there in Georgia, Stacey Abrams and company was very effective in mobilizing and registering people. I've been reading a lot of Republican and conservative commentators who say that one of the problems for Republicans was the fact that the president, while he voiced full support of the Republican candidates, at the same time, he was trying to blow up the Georgia governor and Secretary of State, and he was confusing the people down there, saying the election was rigged and it was stolen from him. I know yesterday there in the U.S. Senate, you withdrew any objections because you wanted to go forward after the violence that was happening there. You also say that people need to quit misleading people about what happened on Election Day.
Yes, Steve, first off, let me correct one thing there. I was never planning to object to any of the certified slates of electors. It's not Congress's role to reverse the election results from Election Day. It's the people's role.
Sorry, you felt that people should withdraw their objections.
Yeah, look, you have some senators who, for political advantage, were giving false hope to their supporters, misleading them into thinking that somehow yesterday's actions in Congress could reverse the results of the election, or even get some kind of emergency audit of the election results. That was never going to happen. Yet these senators, as insurrectionists, literally stormed the Capitol, were sending out fundraising emails. That shouldn't have happened, and it's got to stop now. Now, we do need an independent commission, which I proposed, and Tim Scott has written a bill and introduced it, to study what happened with the election practices in the last election, given the unusual circumstance of the pandemic, and try to improve or try to propose reforms for the future. But what happened yesterday is in part a result of the misleading claims of recent weeks, and also what happened Tuesday night is a result of misleading claims of recent weeks that the people of Georgia's votes didn't count. Look, I mean, if you tell people that their vote doesn't count, that the election is rigged, you shouldn't be surprised when a few of them don't turn out to vote. And that looks like it provided the margin of victory. The Democrats turned out a few percentage points more in their strongholds than Republicans did in Georgia.
So what do you plan to do to study it, to make sure that it doesn't happen and you can give voters out there confidence in the next election?
So, Ainsley, Tim Scott has proposed a bill. I support that bill. That would be a bipartisan independent commission to examine all of the novel practices that were put together in somewhat hasty fashion last year, see what worked, see what didn't work, and then propose model reforms that state legislatures can adopt. That's what happened after the 2001 election. Many of those reforms were adopted at the state level. Some Congress acted in its limited role in election law as well. That's what we should do here as well. We should make sure that the American people have confidence in the integrity of our elections, and we shouldn't allow a once-in-a-century pandemic used to justify sweeping changes on the fly to make those changes permanent.
Senator, I was struck by your tweet last night. You said the president should concede the election. He should go out and concede the election, and a short time after he did, just like you were the first one to bring up stop the flights from China, short time after he did, do you want, not only did the president concede the election, do you want to attend the inauguration?
Well, that's a decision for the president to make, Brian. Yesterday was the final step in the presidential election. The election results have been certified. Joe Biden will be sworn in on January 20th. And what Republicans in the Congress and around the country need to do is now focus on getting organized to defend everything that we believe and to put the brakes on a radical Democratic agenda.
Yeah. You were just mentioned around the country, and it reminded me, Maggie Haberman from the New York Times this morning is reporting that apparently the White House is worried that the kinds of protests we saw yesterday in Washington, D.C., and in fact, there was one in my home state of Kansas. 200 people moved into the State House, although they did have a permit. The White House is worried that those kind of protests could pop up all over the country between now and whenever.
Well, I hope not, Steve, but I would encourage every governor and every mayor to be vigilant about violence of all kinds. As I said last summer, mob violence is never acceptable, and insurrection cannot be tolerated. And no matter what political signs people carry, when they're starting out as protesters, when they become a mob, they have to be stopped immediately with the full force of law.
Senator Cotton, thank you so much for coming on with us this morning.
Yeah, thank you all.
You're welcome. Coming up.